The story was getting more complex and more convoluted, HuaLian thought. He asked, "General, I want to ask." "Don't ask any more," Kermor interrupted. "You killed my soldiers. What more would you want to know?" "I won't answer. Now fight." "I was the one who killed them." "He didn't do anything," San Lang said. "You can answer his questions and fight me." Well, that was irrefutable logic. Kermor yelled angrily. "You're both taking orders from her. There's no difference." HuaLian immediately said, "General Kermor, I think you are mistaken. We've traveled across the Gobi Desert to get rid of the Guoshe of Banyue. How can we be the helpers that she sent for?" Hearing that HuaLian was actually there to destroy the Guoshe, Kermor fell silent. He then asked, "If you weren't helping her, then why did you kill my soldiers?" HuaLian explained, "Isn't it because you were throwing us into the pit and we had to defend ourselves?" Kermor yelled angrily, "Nonsense! I didn't throw a single one of you. I even caught you. You all jumped down yourselves." Yes. We were jumping into the pit ourselves. General, we're all trapped at the bottom of this pit right now. Let's just call it a truce for now, okay? Why did that Banyue Guoshe open the fortress gates and let the enemies in?" HuaLian asked. As if Kermor would listen to reason, he said unrelenting, "The two of you are sly and unjust, fighting me 2-on-1. HuaLian felt a little exasperated. "I only smacked you once. I didn't do much." He didn't mind being called sly or unjust. If the situation called for it, never mind 2-on-1, he would bring 100 to beat one down. Who cared about 1-on-1? But earlier, San Lang obviously had the upper hand, even while carrying him, and told HuaLian not to fight. Kermor seemed to think he could have won if it had just been him and San Lang, and HuaLian felt bad for him. Kermor was incredibly uncooperative, but HuaLian wasn't worried. Kermor seemed to be the type that could easily be made to spill the beans, and they had time, so it was not a problem. San Lang, on the other hand, didn't have the same patience. He lazily said, "You'd better answer his questions for the sake of your soldiers." "You already killed them," Kermor said. "It's pointless using them to threaten me." "They are dead, but their corpses are still around," San Lang replied. Kermor became alarmed, unable to remain sprawled on the ground anymore. "What are you going to do?" he asked. San Lang smirked. "That depends on what you want to do." Just by his voice, HuaLian could imagine San Lang arching his eyebrow. "Do you want their next lives to be fortuitous, or do you want them to be reborn as a pool of blood?" Kermor stopped, but soon understood what San Lang meant and exploded. "You..." The people of Banyue took death and funerals extremely seriously. They believed that, however the deceased looked at the time of their death, was how they were to be reborn. For instance, if the deceased was missing an arm, they would be reborn handicapped. If the corpses in this pit were to be destroyed, then what would their rebirths be like? General Kermor was a purebred Banyue citizen and couldn't help but be afraid. As expected, on the other side of the dark pit, Kermor gritted his teeth in rage, but finally relented helplessly. "Don't touch their bodies," he said. "They were good, brave soldiers. It was already a tragedy to be trapped in the pit for so many years. I don't know whether being killed by you is a blessing or not, but I won't have their corpses be humiliated." He paused and asked, "Are you really here to kill Banyue?" HuaLian replied warmly, "That is no lie. The more we know, the more chance we'll have of winning." Not much is known about the Guo of Banyue on the outside. We have no idea how to fight her, but you have worked under her before in the past. Perhaps you can enlighten us on some things. Maybe it was because they shared the same enemy, the Guo of Banyue, that a sort of bond was developing. Or perhaps in this inescapable chasm, atop the dead bodies of his soldiers, Khmer had become disheartened. Whatever the case may be, the general lost the will to attack them. "You don't know why she opened the gates? Because she's against us," he said. "She hates us. She hates the kingdom of Banyue." "What do you mean, she hates the kingdom of Banyue?" HuaLian asked. "Isn't the Banyue Guo a citizen of Banyue?" "Yes, she is, but not entirely," Khmer replied. "She's of mixed blood. The other half is from Yong'an." Ah. As it turned out, the Banyue Guo was born of a woman of Banyue and a Yong'an man. Living on the border with endless hatred and skirmishes, things were difficult, and the Yong'an man finally had enough and moved away from the border back to Yong'an. Although it was an amicable divorce, the Banyue woman soon passed away from heartache. They left behind a child of 6 to 7 years in age without any guardians. The child wandered the streets, hungry and desperate. The couple had received cold shoulders everywhere when they were around, and now their daughter also received contempt wherever she went. The people of Banyue were tall and brawny and saw beauty in strength and liveliness. But this girl was born of mixed blood and appeared small and scrawny amongst the Banyue children. She grew up being bullied and became more and more sullen. The Banyue children wouldn't play with her, but there were some Yong'an children who did pay attention to her. When this little mixed-blood girl was in her teens, a riot broke out, and the two armies fought. That battle took many lives, and afterwards, the little mixed-blood girl disappeared. She had neither friends nor family in Banyue, so no one noticed or cared when she vanished. The next time she appeared was a different story. In those years, she walked thousands of miles and crossed the Gobi Desert to Yong'an. No one knew what kind of encounters she'd had, but she returned having learned black magic and could control the venomous creature most feared by the citizens of Banyue, the scorpion snakes. Upon her return, though many were impressed, many were also afraid. That was because the girl's personality never changed. She was still gloomy and unsociable. There were also many who bullied her in the past. If she were to enter the palace and become a high-ranking official, wouldn't she one day seek revenge against them? "I'm sure there were many who spoke poorly of her," HuaLian commented. Khmer humphed. Not only just slander. They went to the palace directly to advise the king, saying that she was an evil messenger from the Scorpion Snake clan, here to bring ruin to the kingdom of Banyue. But none of them succeeded. HuaLian guessed. Did she rush to have those people hung first? Khmer was even more disgusted. "You, man of Yong'an, why is your mind so full of depraved and vile developments?" "It was none of that. I protected her." HuaLian was exasperated. "I already said that I'm not from Yong'an." "All right, whatever." At the time, Khmer was already a distinguished, fierce warrior. There was a time that he took his troops out to annihilate the nest of a band of desert bandits and brought the girl who was the palace sorceress along. That band of bandits was strong, building their nest below the sands. In that battle, both sides suffered casualties, and while Kamor stole the victory, the battle caused the nest below the sands to collapse. With this and the coming of windstorms, they couldn't stay. Kamor took a number of soldiers to retreat, but the other group that included the sorceress wasn't able to escape. Once they retreated to a safe point and waited out the sandstorm, Kamor returned anew, hoping to dig out the soldiers to bury them properly. Yet who knew that when he got there, he found that the sorceress had, by her powers alone, dug out a sizable hole and managed to drag all the surviving wounded soldiers in to hide away from the winds. All the bodies of the dead were all dug out too and laid out in a neat order. She had done this all by herself, and when they got there, that sorceress's body was covered in blood, but was still guarding the entrance to that hole silently, hugging her knees and waiting for them, like a small, little, lone wolf. After that incident, I thought she was a good woman who did the right thing, Kamor said. I believed that she had never the intention to harm the kingdom of Banyue. I became her guarantor with all my might and fought back all those malicious voices. In addition, Kamor himself grew up bullied and could understand her strife, so naturally he paid more attention to her. The more attention he paid, the more he realized just how powerful this girl was, and thus endorsed her all the way, helping her reach the position of Guo Shi and becoming what was later recorded as the most loyal supporter of the Guo Shi of Banyue. This lasted until another war broke out, and the kingdom of Yong'an sent armies to annihilate the kingdom of Banyue. With the two armies clashing and at a lengthy standstill, she conducted a grand ceremony to pray to the heavens, saying it was to bring blessings unto us Banyue soldiers, Kamor said. Thus, the soldiers' will to kill exploded. Their battle spirits significantly raised. They defended the fortress gates to the death. There were arrows, giant boulders, boiling oil, swords, and blades. The slaughtering was incessantly great. Yet, unexpectedly, just as the fighting was at its height, the Guo Shi suddenly opened the fortress gates. With the gates opened wide, millions of enemy troops swarmed into the city like mad. After the trampling of iron steeds, the entire fortress city had instantly become a ritual of blood. Kamor, who was fighting hard against the enemies, went mad with rage when he heard that the Guo Shi had opened the gates. But no matter how tough he was, one could not win alone against so many. Kamor gritted his teeth. I only learned then that she had long since colluded with the enemy general and agreed to let them in at that moment. But even if I was destined to die in battle, before I died, I was going to kill that traitor, no matter what. So I sent a troop of soldiers to charge up the fortress tower, and we dragged her down, hanging her dead over the sinner's pit. We hung her over that pole. After the enemy troops had passed, the kingdom of Banyue became a kingdom of death. The Guo Shi and the general who died in this battle also became trapped within the ruins, both watching the other in a mutual grudge and hate. HuaLian asked, So General Kamor, you led the Banyue soldiers under you to search for the shadows of that Guo Shi, and every time you capture her, you'd hang her head over the sinner's pit? It wouldn't be anything, even if we hung her dead 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, Kamor exclaimed, because she's been apprehending all my soldiers who have turned savage and throwing them into the sinner's pit. She set up a powerful array around the pit that only she herself can break, and once you fall, you can never climb back up. And those of us who have been betrayed by her, Those soldiers who died wrongfully in battle hold a deep resentment that only devouring the flesh and blood of those from young An can appease, and allow us to slowly pass from this earth with our hatred released. Otherwise, they can only howl deep into the long nights without absolution. So is that why you kept capturing people to feed them? HuaLian asked. What else can we do? Kermor replied. Have me listen to them wail down below without doing anything? The people you threw down, did you catch them yourselves? HuaLian asked. We can't stray too far from the kingdom of Banyue, but thankfully her snakes like to haunt and often crawl out of the ruins to bite people. Those caravans who were bitten would then come into the city to look for the Shanyue fern. That mud face in the palace, was it you who buried it? HuaLian asked. That's right, Kermor said. That man buried in the earth was originally planning on robbing the riches of the palace. But all the treasures our kingdom had were all cleaned out by those young An men 200 years ago. Why did you only bury him instead of throwing him down directly? HuaLian asked. There's got to be fertilizer to grow the ferns, after all, Kermor replied. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to hold those scorpion snakes back. We don't want to run into those creatures either. That's not right, HuaLian thought. If Kermor and his party consciously knew to grow and fertilize the Shanyue ferns, even going as far as using live humans as fertilizer, then it was clear that even though they were no longer alive, their fear of those scorpion snakes had never lessened. If that was the case, then while they were alive, that fear must have been greater. If that Banyue Gorsha could control a murder weapon as great as those scorpion snakes, then why would she so easily be dragged down the fortress tower by a bunch of soldiers and be hung to death? According to Kermor, in the past 200 years, he had captured the Gorsha over and over and hung her dead repeatedly. Either way, HuaLian felt that if it was him, and he had such a killing weapon in his hands, he would never allow the enemy the chance to come near him. And that the snakes would leave the fortress to hunt was also of interest. Was it an accident? Not likely. More likely, they were purposely trying to lure people into the pass. Then, was it the Gorsha's intentional doing? Wouldn't it only be helping Kermor to catch live humans to feed his soldiers? Mutual hatred wouldn't make sense then. Were they pretending to be enemies? What was the point in that? And in all of this mess, there was also the mysterious lady in white and her companion. HuaLian decided to ask more questions. General Kermor, when we first entered the fortress, we saw two ladies, one in white and one in black. Do you know who they are? Before there was a response, Sanlang whispered, Shh. HuaLian didn't know what was going on, but closed his mouth immediately. A strange hunch made him look up. It was the same framed navy blue sky with the crescent moon, but next to the moon he saw a person. A small, black-clad silhouette peered over the edge and was looking down. After watching them for a bit, the little form suddenly grew bigger. It had jumped down. As the figure fell, HuaLian could see clearly that it was a Gorsha who had been hanging on the pole earlier.